Okay, folks, here we go. This is Maranatha's School Match 2025 summary of results and insights gained. Okay, so what is Match? Match is a national benchmarking assessment done by the IEB. Um, it measures high school readiness, basically, but not just in terms of curriculum coverage, but in terms of the skills and the soft skills as well that allow children to have success academically within the high school situation and then later. So it has to do with problem solving, has to do with contextual analysis, being able to express understanding, all of those things. Um, yeah, and who writes this test? Well, there were 2,045 learners across Southern Africa who wrote it. It's IEB Primary School Initiative schools that write the test. I'll give you some insight into who that is just now. The test each year is actually two papers. The first paper is an extended response paper where you give paragraph style answers. Um, it's much more challenging and much longer, much more difficult to finish, in fact, than the second paper. The second paper is a multiple choice paper. Both of them really cover the same thing. They cover critical and creative thinking, problem solving, cognitive flexibility, and the foundational literacy and numeracy skills, math and English skills, specifically comprehension and composition skills, which are the key skills for English. Um, it's a very good test or a series of tests. Yes, and it's run through the IEB, but it's set by experienced teachers who teach grade 7 and have taught grade 7 for a long time. So to give you an idea of who we mean when we say the primary school initiative schools, which schools are actually writing these tests, the match skills, the match test, the IB core skills, and the IBTs. They are the tests that are set by the IEB, and primary school initiative schools are required to do at least some of these tests. So these are the primary school initiative schools. There are many of them, but I just took a couple of screenshots from the IEB's webpage. If you just Google IEB primary schools or primary school initiative schools, you will get a long list of all the schools within South Africa and, in fact, Southern Africa that are registered with the primary school initiative and that therefore do these benchmarking school tests. All right, so here is a summary of our results as a school versus the IEB average. So the IEB, again, to be clear, we're talking about all the schools that participated from that primary school initiative set. They are the best schools in the country: Cornwallis, St Andrews, all the really um, prestigious schools do these tests. So that is who we are competing against. The average from the IEB uh, for paper one and paper two together was 58, and ours was 61. So, point being that we beat the school, the average from the IEB. We did better than the average IEBs. That doesn't mean we did better than the average school. That means we did better than these very prestigious schools on average. So I think we can congratulate our staff and learners and you parents for what you've invested in the kids and what we've been able to achieve. This summary shows where within each sort of strata, a 7 being a kid who's getting sort of 80% or higher, meaning that 13% of our learners scored 80% or higher in the tests, and in the IEB average was 8%. And then you can go down through the strata to get an idea of how we did as a whole. This is a quick visual summary showing paper one. That's the paper with the more extended answers where you have to express yourself in paragraphs. Language is a big issue here. So you can see, although we have much lower percentage in the bottom strata, we also have quite a large section right in the middle strata. And that comes down to language skills. So in order to do better at this test, it is down to language skills. Not just simply, can you understand English? Can you understand the text? But can you express yourself? Can you think through English? Can you use English as a tool for thinking to solve real world situation problems, to have insight into complicated questions? And that is the real test. So we have some room for growth there, and we'll talk about some of the things we want to do. Here are the results for the second test, the multiple choice test. You can see that the average, our average is just a little bit higher, um, almost 1 percentage point higher than the IEB average, but it's actually quite similar if you analyze the two. Ours is on the right, the IEB's is on the left. Um, uh, what this shows is that when you are doing multiple choice style answers, you're still having to show insight, you're still having to solve real world problems, but the output, the way that you give your answer, the way you express your answer is less demanding. So again, it comes down to language skills. Um, where in this test, it's not such a serious thing. That's why we see a smaller difference between us and the other schools in terms of the length of our tail and the size of our strongest learners. So this is the IEB's response based on all of those very well, the best schools in the country, really. Um, the findings from the insights into how all of those schools did in their grade 7 match this year. What we're finding is that there are specific issues that need to be addressed. So what they say is in mathematics, we have to scaffold multi-step problems using visual models. So the use of models is very important. That is, again, something we teach and something we need to continue to emphasize. Integrating real-world context into problem-solving tasks, that's really important, which builds transfer skills and makes abstract concepts more accessible. In other words, it means that you can solve this problem later in a different context. You're not just able to solve the same one that you saw in the textbook. Encourage learners to verbalize their reasoning and justify each step. That's a really important thing. We're emphasizing it a lot in our maths curriculum that we're writing. It's really, really important for kids to be able to express why they're doing what they're doing. When they are doing maths, they're not just understanding maths, they're doing maths, and they are able to express why they are taking the steps that they're doing, why they are following the steps that they're making in order to answer the question. For English, the focus should be on developing inference and synthesis skills, which basically means taking a text, inferring information from the text, and synthesizing an answer that is succinct and clear and answers the question in a way that can easily be understood through guided reading and structural discussion. So we have a literary-based approach, and we are very heavy on comprehension as well. And it's for these reasons. These are the real key skills. You do not learn English through grammar. You learn English through comprehension and writing. Grammar is just a tool to be able to get you to write better. It's just a tool to be able to get you to understand a sentence structure better when you are comprehending a text. That's the only reason we do grammar. Same thing is true of spelling. All these things are not valuable in their own. The only thing that's really valuable is, can you read or view a text and interpret it and synthesize your interpretation of it in a way that people can understand your point of view. And that's what all of these schools are seeing, that there's room for improvement across across the world. And because this is a problem that's across the world, there are some things that we need to realize that in our world are a problem that were not a world in previous generations. And I have some advice for you as parents about what you can do to help your kids. Okay, so three pieces of advice for you as parents. If you want to help your kid get ahead, be as ready as possible academically for high school, as ready as possible later when they go into tertiary education, as ready as possible for the world and the demands of the world. These are the three things that I think you should be doing now. Number one, you need to make your home as text rich as possible. That means both in terms of the books that kids have access to and what they are actually seeing as a visual text in their screen time. It used to be that television was our friend, because I could tell parents, make sure your kids are watching good television that has a good narrative process. In other words, there's a beginning of a story, a middle of a story, an end of a story. There is problem solving within the story. There is clear plot. and that there is good English actually being modeled for them. Now, most of what kids are watching on screens is short form, with no plot, and no middle, no end. It's just a short form reel or a little TikTok or something. Everything is very short and has no structure. And that is really messing with our kids. What it does is it produces kids who cannot follow arguments, who have very limited attention spans, who live in a constant state of dopamine deficit, so they find it extremely difficult to motivate themselves to focus. Um, so that is something you as a parent need to mediate. You have to mediate their screen time and their access to texts. Secondly, teach your children to verbalize their thinking. And this can be, I know it can be difficult, but I sit at my table with my kids, my wife and we ask them questions and we help them to verbalize their opinion. So, there are lots of these sort of discussion things. You can get them online, discussion points to talk with your kids. Um, but in a more natural way, you're asking them, what do you think about what happened today? Or, you know, if you're into a sport, what do you think is going to happen in the next match? Why do you think so? Allow them to verbalize their thinking process because they think through language. And if we allow them to give us only sort of little grunts and short yes or no answers and monosyllabic answers, if that's all we expect from them, then you shouldn't really expect them to be able to do it at school. They have to be able to be taught that they are expected when they give an opinion to give reasons for their opinion, to be able to support their reasoning. And the best way to do that is to model it for them at the dining room table and in the car when you're traveling. The third thing, recognize that the chosen medium of English in higher education in South Africa and most of the world is English. It is the mode through which we learn. And unfair as that is, it doesn't matter whether it's socially just or not at this stage. We have to think about what's good for our children. And in the reality, from a pragmatic point of view, the biggest thing you can do to help your child is make sure that they have access to good English, that they are having English modeled for them correctly, that they have access to English texts, because that is the medium of their thinking, not just the medium of their learning, the medium of their thinking. Um, uh, because so much of the tools for thinking that they're getting out of textbook is in English, and that makes their lives very, very complicated if you're not giving them that capacity, if you're not encouraging them to speak as much English as possible and to hear as much good English as possible. So that is our feedback from the match, and we thank you again as parents and our staff and kids for all the hard work. I'm very proud of the school for how we're doing, but there is always room for improvement.